Welcome to our show, excerpts from the 6 Enneads by Plotinus, Vegetarian, Part 1 of 2, on Words of Wisdom. Plotinus was one of the most influential philosophers in antiquity after Plato and Aristotle. In his philosophy, there are 3 principles: the one, the intellect, and the soul. Historians of the 19th century invented the term Neoplatonism and applied it to Plotinus's philosophy. His metaphysical writings have inspired centuries of Islamic, Jewish, Christian, and Gnostic metaphysicians. The issue of happiness is one of Plotinus's greatest imprints on Western thought, as he was one of the first to introduce the idea that happiness is attainable only within consciousness. From all accounts, his personal and social life exhibited the highest moral and spiritual standards. He disliked talking about his own life, disapproved of meat, and refused medications containing animal substances. Plotinus's final words were, "Try to raise the divine in yourselves to the divine in the all." Long before his physical departure, the philosopher entrusted 2 of his closest disciples, Porphyry and Amelius, with the extensive task of collecting, revising, and compiling his writings. Thus, the 6 Enneads was published to share Plotinus's precious insight with countless generations. It consists of 54 treatises varied in length, arranged in 6 sets of 9 Ennead in 3 volumes. The Enneads are sorted by levels of sophistication, starting with the first Ennead, which emphasizes ethical topics. Today, we are delighted to share with our joyful audiences a beautiful gem selected from the 6 Enneads by Plotinus, Vegetarian. The first Ennead, first tractate, The Animate and the Man, sections 7 to 9. The first Ennead, first tractate, The Animate and the Man, section 7. The truth lies in the consideration that the couplement subsists by virtue of the soul's presence. This, however, is not to say that the soul gives itself to form either the couplement or the body. No, from the organized body and something else, let us say a light, which the soul gives forth from itself, it forms a distinct principle. The animate and in this principle are vested sense perception and all the other experiences found to belong to the animate. But the we, how have we sense perception? By the fact that we are not separate from the animate so constituted, even though certainly other and nobler elements go to make up the entire many-sided nature of man. The faculty of perception in the soul cannot act by the immediate grasping of sensible objects, but only by the discerning of impressions printed upon the animate by sensation. These impressions are already intelligibles, while the outer sensation is a mere phantom of the other of that in the soul, which is nearer to authentic existence as being an impassive reading of ideal forms. And by means of these ideal forms, by which the soul wields single lordship over the animate, we have discursive reasoning, sense knowledge, and intellection. From this moment, we have peculiarly the we. Before this, there was only the ours. But at this stage stands the we, the authentic human principle, loftily presiding over the animate. There is no reason why the entire compound entity should not be described as the animate, or living being mingled in a lower phase. And since the man, so understood, is essentially the associate of the reasoning soul, in our reasoning, it is the we that reasons, and that the use and act of reason is a characteristic act of the soul. The first Ennead, first tractate, The Animate and the Man, Section 8. And towards the intellectual principle, what is our relation? By this I mean the intellectual principle itself, divine mind. This also we possess as the summit of our being. And how do we possess the divinity? In that the divinity is contained in the intellectual principle and authentic existence, and we come third in order after these two, for the we is constituted by a union of the supreme, the undivided soul, we read, and that soul which is divided among living bodies. For, note, we inevitably think of the soul, though one undivided in the all, as being present to bodies in division. Insofar as any bodies are animates, the soul has given itself to each of the separate material masses, or rather it appears to be present in the bodies by the fact that it shines into them. It makes them living beings, not by merging into body, but by giving forth without any change in itself. The first Ennead, first tractate, The Animate and the Man, Section 9. That soul, then, in us, will in its nature stand apart from all that can cause any of the evils which man does or suffers. For all such evil, as we have seen, belongs only to the animate, the couplement. But there's a difficulty in understanding how the soul can go guiltless if our mentation and reasoning are vested in it. For all this lower kind of knowledge is delusion and is the cause of much of what is evil. When we have done evil, it is because we have been worsted by our baser side, for a man is many by desire or rage, or some evil image. The misnamed reasoning that takes up with the false, in reality fancy, has not stayed for the judgment of the reasoning principle. We have acted at the call of the less worthy, just as in matters of the sense sphere we sometimes see falsely because we credit only the lower perception, that of the couplement, without applying the tests of the reasoning faculty. The intellectual principle has held aloof from the act and so is guiltless, or, as we may state it, all depends on whether we ourselves have or have not put ourselves in touch with the intellectual realm, either in the intellectual principle or within ourselves, for it is possible at once to possess and not to use. Thus, we have marked off what belongs to the couplement from what stands by itself. The one group has the character of body and never exists apart from body, while all that has no need of body for its manifestation belongs peculiarly to soul, and the understanding, as passing judgment upon sense impressions, is at the point of division of ideal forms, seeing them as it were with an answering sensation, with consciousness. This last is at any rate true of the understanding in the veritable soul. For understanding, the true, is the act of the intellections. In many of its manifestations, it is the assimilation and reconciliation of the outer to the inner. Thus, in spite of all, the soul is at peace as to itself and within itself. All the changes and all the turmoil we experience are the issue of what is subjoined to the soul, and are, as have said, the states and experiences of this elusive couplement.
Every day, I have the choice to live a life of compassion that not only saves animals, but helps the environment. Kat Von D, vegan.
Beautiful viewers, we hope you enjoyed our show today. Excerpts from the 6 Enneads by Plotinus, vegetarian, part 1 of 2 on words of wisdom.